Let's keep it moving forward to Javien Robinson, who committed to South Carolina actually just a couple of days ago now, and listed, depending on where you look, 6'1", 6'2", 185 pounds, a Pennsylvania kid. We saw South Carolina obviously going to Pennsylvania and get Lex Cyrus a couple of cycles ago at the same position. We'll get into the highlights and the skill set here in a second, Chris. So let's start, though, with the recruitment itself. And another situation here where a guy was going to take his OVs, had this, like I feel like we still see the plan be similar to what we've seen over the last 3, 4, 5 years. The plan is take OVs in the summer, decide in June, July, August. The plan is still there, but we're seeing more and more guys move up their recruitments and go ahead and make a decision. And that was the case here. Did not take his official visits, went ahead and locked in his commitment with South Carolina.
Yeah, locked it in, and just really odd almost recruitment in some ways. Maybe that's not the best word, but this is a guy that in February didn't have South Carolina on his list, and frankly didn't have an offer from South Carolina back in February. So it's odd's probably the wrong word, just a non-traditional recruitment. That's a better word. Odd almost seems like a negative connotation. Not that way at all. This is just a recruitment that doesn't follow maybe your typical high school track where, you offer a guy early, you build a relationship over a long period of time. Obviously, South Carolina knew about Javien Robinson, but didn't offer until February. He had a top 5 back in February that didn't include the Gamecocks. But once they offered, things really advanced very, very quickly here. Got him on campus in April for an unofficial visit. He basically immediately got an official visit booked to South Carolina that'll take place still next month in June. And then from there, had kind of seen enough. You look at his list of schools, West South Carolina is kind of an outlier being an SEC program. That really appealed to him. Mike Furry quickly built a really strong relationship, and he just really liked what he saw and heard from Shane Beamer's program in Columbia. And I think just as a player, a little bit different than a few of the other guys that they've taken. When you look at the 25 class, 26, different than DJ Huggins, who's the other 2027 commitment, and that he looks more like, your true outside receiver, not 6'4" or anything, right? But 6'1", 6'2", has room to get bigger and stronger, plays outside in high school, and it looks like he probably projects there at the SEC level in Columbia too.
Yeah, a little bit of disagreement on the rankings to this point. That'll be something I think we'll be keeping an eye on. Does the distance between the opinions on his ranking kind of shrink, or does it continue to be, where there are some outliers here in terms of how the industry sees him? If you're on the video version, you can see that on your screen right now. But Chris, and then even, came down to Syracuse and Rutgers as the other finalists. You certainly imagine that those are the other two that were also really pushing for him, because he did have some other Power 4 offers. You had Miami, Virginia Tech, West Virginia, Wisconsin, Florida State, Wake Forest, and then some others involved here. So, I think for him, it probably came down to where he was most comfortable. There was a lot of, I would say, Rutgers buzz here when they were one of the schools that was really pushing it for him before South Carolina started making their push. Once the Gamecocks made their push, they were able to get him added to the commitment list here, obviously. But, man, looking at this here, you have rivals having him as the number 80 wide receiver in his class. Huge disparity here. 24/7 Sports has him number 33 in his class, and then the industry ranking, as you would imagine, and then also ESPN. Those two numbers almost an average of the rivals number and the 24/7 number. So what that comes out to is a 4-star, but right on the kind of bottom edge of that, number 400 prospect in the country, number 57 wide receiver in the country. And so, I think you look at Charles Power and those guys, they put a ton of stock in how much do you continue to improve into your senior year? Do you continue to build that momentum in your final year as you become an older player, or have you kind of plateaued? So I do think with a big senior season, there will be an opportunity for Javien Robinson to move up in the rivals ranking, which then would in turn help him to move up in that industry ranking right now. Because certainly, 80th at his position and 33rd at his position is really a pretty wide disparity, especially right now in the recruiting world we live in now, where a lot of times you don't get a complete consensus, but there's a little bit closer to a consensus on a lot of these guys in terms of where they fall.
Yeah, it is a big gap. And, to go to South Carolina's, evaluation, probably take, definitely wanted two receivers, which you have now in Robinson and DJ Huggins. Might take a third. You can now be choosy with that spot. And South Carolina liked Javien Robinson and DJ Huggins enough to go ahead and take them early, right? When you didn't, have to just to fill a spot at the high school level. So um, I think that says something, just in terms of the internal evaluation. And you always have to, wait and see how does a guy develop. It's not right now. It's not even year one. It's what does he look like in 3, 4, even 5 years. But I think it's noteworthy that they liked him enough to take him this early, especially when they're juggling some other options at the receiver position where they kind of said that this is the guy we want out of some of those other options that have still been on the board. So a guy they like, again, a guy that's different than DJ Huggins, who's a little bit more of maybe that slot type receiver. So they have a little bit of versatility between those two spots so far in this class.
Yeah, let's go out to the film, Chris, and this will give everybody a little bit of a look at just what he's all about as a player. And as you said, outside wide receiver first and foremost. And I think he is a little bit different than DJ, a little bit different than than Stone and the guys that they brought in the last class. So I think that to me matters when you're like building out a roster. You do want a little bit of diversity in terms of the skill set of the guys that you're bringing in. And Sequel Patterson being the other guy they brought in last year, of course, at wide receiver, but also kind of a slot guy. This is someone who can go down the field and just to me, Chris, has kind of that long speed you look for to play outside. I always look at the inside guys more like short burst. What's your explosiveness look like? I look at the outside guys like when you get to top speed, are you outrunning people? Are you able to go up and catch the football and high point it if there's a defender around you? Are you able to adjust to the football? You're going to be expected to catch the ball way downfield as opposed to running these shorter routes or even seam routes from the slot position. And then I think you have to have a little bit of just kind of physicality to you because they're going to want you to get out there and block and use your size against corners. And I think there's upside here, Chris. Like to me, this is your typical high upside, but a little bit raw because of the offensive scheme that he is in type player. You mentioned the versatility. He's also, you see here in this film, he's playing corner, he's playing some safety. But if you just saw that clip right there, there's a lot of three backs in the backfield, lots of option. Like this is a run-based offense that you're playing in. So you're kind of trading off a little bit of the experience some guys at his position would have playing in a little bit more of a pass-first, like pass-based offense. You're trading that in for what is some pretty apparent upside here, both in the eye test and what you're going to see from some of his numbers, at 6'1", at 6'2", and a sub 11 100.
Yeah, and I don't think this is a kid, Wes, that if you put, I don't know his 40 time. I don't think this is a kid that you put on the stopwatch and get a 4.3. Because like you said, if that were the case, not only would you be sub 11, you might be a 10.4. This isn't, that I think that was Lex Cyrus's speed coming out. The last guy they signed at receiver from Pennsylvania, smaller guy, but he was, can jump apparently, which we didn't know and learned when he got to Carolina. And was 10.4 speed. But I think this is a guy that has some football speed. He's got that long speed that you talked about. He definitely does a really good job of tracking the ball down the field. Right now, he's kind of a deep route type of guy. That's what they ask him to do mostly at the high school level. And they find some other ways to get him the ball. Hey, this is our best athlete. Let's run him on a jet sweep. Let's find a way to get him the ball, get him in space. So I think to your point about the rawness, that there will be some refinement needed here, just in terms of the route tree, how you're running routes. But there's some material to work with here because he's willing to mix it up. He has some size, he has some twitchiness to him, and he can certainly go get the ball down the field. And so, guy that Mike Furry seemed to really like the traits there, and someone that he can work with once he gets on campus.
Yeah, for sure. From what I've seen, you're talking about a 4.5 guy in the 40, Chris, which I think I think that tracks. You look at and I'm going to lean in on our guy Charles Power a little bit here, man, as we always do. He likes his flexibility, his agility, his change of direction. Can make people miss in the open field. Also mentions, of course, that he does play in a run-based offense, so he likes the tools, but just I think compared to some other guys who are like your what you would say in recruiting are like can't miss high 4-star type prospects. He's more of an athlete playing receiver right now as opposed to being this super refined wide receiver. But that's where the development, that's where going and playing for a guy like Mike Furry comes into play. And I don't know, man. I like that he can mix it up and play some DB too. And Torian Gray may start calling his phone too now, just looking at some of this stuff.
Is he tall enough? 6'1", is that tall enough, you think?
Oh yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, Torian's like, hey, I kind of like the way this guy looks.
I mean, doesn't he look kind of like a Torian Gray DB?
Yeah, he 100% does. Don't show Torian the film if you're the offensive staff. He might become interested in a hurry.